Hello and welcome to the Market Bull podcast. Please note, topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial or investment advice. Today on the show, I spoke with Simon Linge, the CEO of Lithium Australia, which is listed on the ASX under code LIT. Simon discussed his history in business before delving into what brought him to Lithium Australia and becoming the CEO in January of 2023. The majority of our conversation focused on the three integrated components of the Lithium Australian business, being recycling, batteries, and chemicals for the circular battery sector. Breaking down each of these segments, Simon talked about the addressable market in Australia and globally, plus what the company has in store over the next few years. I hope you enjoy listening. So, hello and welcome to the Market Bull podcast. I'm your host, Ben Kostrich, and joining me on the show today is Simon Linge, the CEO of Lithium Australia. It's his first time on the show and the first time I'm exploring this side of the lithium sector. So, welcome to the show, Simon.
Ben, great to be with you.
So you were appointed CEO early this year, the 1st of January. So we're approaching the 6-month period for yourself. Yep. But naturally, you did a lot of things before approaching this role. So can you fill us in on a little bit about your history and your exposure to the business, maybe the mine, the chemical world, or your origin story?
Yeah. So a long way from battery technology business, which is what Lithium Australia is today. My background's really out of BlueScope Steel, predominantly, a 29-year career, and really working with BlueScope all over the world, leading businesses throughout Asia, particularly Malaysia, China, a stint in New Zealand, a bit of time in the US, back up into Indonesia, and at the end of my career with BlueScope, really running the Southeast Asian business, which was sort of $1.5 billion business across 7 out of the 10 ASEAN countries. A lot of fun growing that business, and then got poached to become MD and CEO of a company called Bradken, which is a global foundry business owned by Hitachi, and we really successfully grew through the team there, that business significantly over a number of years to really be a leader in the mining services sector around foundry products and components. And then after stepping down and handing over the reins to the next generation, I was wondering what to do, was helping a friend out restructure a business for sale when Lithium Australia came along, and completely different end of the spectrum for me, from working with large corporates to working with a small ASX business that's technology driven, but really enjoyed the story, understood where the board was trying to take the company. And the opportunity, particularly in this world that's looking at decarbonisation, changing supply chains, and we've got a great set of technologies that can seize on that moment.
So naturally going into, as you said, potentially a sector or industry that you weren't overly familiar with, but clearly saw an excitement or opportunity to grow. And as you said, the decarbonisation, where the world's going, you could happily say a no-brainer, but technology these days, it's a fascinating place, but what was really involved in educating yourself and upskilling, and what was the real attraction to taking on the role as well?
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, I'm not an engineer. I'll confess that from the get-go. But I've worked with enough of them that I can get to understand things. So really immersing myself, even before getting on board, formally on the 1st of January with some of the engineering team and the technical teams, to try to understand. It is a fascinating place. It's very complex. It's more complex than steel and metals. You're dealing with electrical components, chemistry. It deals with the shape of nanotechnology and particles and lots of other chemical processes that are new to me. But I've got a really strong chemical engineering team around us, some really deep experts and really smart people in this space. So I know I can rely on them, but I equally want to know a bit. So they've helped educate me, and they continue to educate me every day in terms of upskilling my knowledge. But the opportunity is huge for Australia, and including Lithium Australia in this whole critical battery materials space, and that's where we see ourselves playing.
So that was going to be my next point, delving into what Lithium Australia is. Can you sort of explain what the company is and where its focus and direction is going?
Yeah, look, it's been a fascinating journey. Lithium Australia did start out as a mining explorer. and found a CEO who retired mid last year. Started to deal with lithium exploration, so he's probably one of those that's at the sort of cutting edge. Saw that there was a lot of waste out of lithium mines, spodumene mines, and I'll come back to that later. But saw some opportunities to use some tech to reduce that waste and therefore have more lithium units that could be sold. In doing that, bumped into other people, had the opportunity to buy a battery materials business, the cathode active materials business called VSPC. Did that in 2017. Then along the way, bought a recycling business, battery recycling business in forestry. Saw those opportunities, and slowly but surely, I guess, saw the pivot away from being a mining explorer to being a battery technology business focused on a circular battery industry. We've secured that pivot. We're now very clear about what our purpose is and where we're going with the organisation, and very excited about the prospects of the organisation and the part we can play in decarbonising the world.
Naturally, it's gone through quite a transformational period, but clearly there's been people involved along the way or currently. So who's involved in Lithium Australia and some of the board and key sort of figures involved in driving this new future for the company?
Yeah, look, I've got the privilege of working with a really strong board. George Borkarcher has had a long time in mining, particularly in rare earth mining, and understands that well. Very strong in running businesses, and great mentor for me, which is what you need as a CEO. Christy Young also had a mining background, but a lot of professional services consulting, and so really thinks about business issues in a strategic way. And then Phil Thick, a global executive with Shell for multi-decades, and his last executive role was CEO for Tianqi's Kwinana facility that they're continuing to
still ongoing.
Yeah. Within our executive team, we've got a nice balance of relatively new people and experienced people. Stuart Tarrant, our CFO, strong banking, but also business development and working with smaller scale businesses and bringing successfully through the market transition. Julie Coleman, our head of people, recently come on board, but really helped us a long corporate career and helping us really frame our people strategies, because as we grow, we will need good people. And then we've got 3 Andrews. It is an issue in our business. You've got to have an Andrew in your name, and mine, I do have an Andrew in the middle name, but Andrew McKenzie, he was the founder of our recycling business and has stayed with it as Lithium Australia acquired it. He's very much entrenched in a business development role, really thinking about the next 2-3+ years about what we can do. Andrew Skowski really driving the integration across the business. We sort of were a bit siloed and separate, and we're really driving synergies to provide cost out, but also to allow us to build our processes and our systems as we grow. And then Andrew Napier, who's our GM Technology Development, a really experienced engineer who's got lots of, not only very capable at an engineering level, but really comes at it through a commercial lens, which is not always a blend that you can see, but been a very successful career in commercialising technology. So we've got a really nice blend of skill sets, experiences, and I think at the executive level, and then we've got a board that's really supportive and wants to work with management to grow the business.
And this feeds into what the company is doing, because there's 3 key components that I took away, and naturally going to the website and learning, but there's the recycling, the batteries, and the chemicals side of the business. And that's what you mentioned before about the acquisition and the changes and the shifts in the company. So, I mean, there's a lot to go through there. We may as well start with recycling, but if we're setting the scene for that side of the company and what you're doing in that and why is really the main question. But what's happening in the recycling side of Lithium Australia?
Yeah. So we're a battery recycler here in Australia, and collecting all sorts of end-of-life batteries for processing and then capturing those value streams. The beauty of lithium-ion batteries is that you've got a high recovery rate of the key critical materials that are required, so nickel, cobalt, lithium. So that's where that business is focused. The Australian market is still evolving. This whole end-of-life recycling around the world is still evolving. But we're at the leading edge. We've got first mover advantage here in Australia. So what we do is we're collecting batteries. We've got relationships at a consumer level with people like Bunnings and Officeworks and Battery World, where we collect sort of handheld sort of batteries, smaller end of batteries. And then we're working with EV makers, energy storage, battery makers to recycle end-of-life batteries. In the energy storage space and EV space, you get some failures. So at the moment, that's predominantly what we're seeing come in. But we get those batteries, we discharge them, dismantle them, and then put them through a shredding process. We then recover the key materials out of that, so steel, copper, aluminium, and then something that's known in the industry as black mass. We call it mixed metal dust, which is really all the chemicals inside the batteries other than the electrolytes. We have a process for removing those. So really you're left with the graphite as a carbon, but then the nickel and the cobalt. At the moment, we're then shipping that off to North Asia, particularly Korea, Japan, with partners who then go through what is known as a hydrometallurgical process to recover then the battery grade materials of lithium carbonate or a nickel sulfate and cobalt, and which can then be reused in batteries.
Yeah, and the recycling side of it pretty much goes without saying. The idea that we're adopting these EVs at this incredibly advanced rate, but the problem solving is what do you do when the battery dies is not something that's necessarily discussed a lot in, say, the mainstream. It's not really a topic that is that darling. No one really wants to talk about it. Why do you think that's the case? If we just not approach that real tight position whereby there's no Teslas there to just be taken off the roads or all these cars, because I think to mobile phones when they first started, the iPhones would last a year if that, and then you'd bin it. And this is a whole other scale if a car's doing that. And naturally, the technology is advancing and batteries will last longer, but that doesn't neglect the ones that are currently on the road that are churning to that important time of what's next.
Yeah. Look, I think the whole issue of circularity is starting to rise. Whether it's in plastics and how do you recycle things and bring it back in and building circularity into design. There is certainly a greater focus on producer responsibility and seeing the full life cycle of that. We've seen that growingly in e-waste, like mobile phones, etc. But there's certainly a push in government to start to deal with the issue of batteries and recycling batteries, particularly lithium-ion batteries. And that's also associated with the safety aspect of lithium-ion batteries. People will talk about houses being burnt down and other things because lithium-ion batteries get punctured and set alight. So it's a safety issue. It's a recycling issue. The federal government's already put the industry on notice that there will be regulation coming. Victoria's already stepping down that path. I think a lot of the other states are
Following suit as well.
And they can start to see that. It will be a significant issue probably in the next 5+ years and grow exponentially after that. So I think we will see regulation in this space. I think I know in dealing with the large EV makers and energy storage battery makers, they want to deal with it responsibly as well. They want to make sure that they've got certification of the fact that their batteries have been recycled, so they can prove that as part of their sustainability credentials. We're also seeing in Europe greater regulation around recycled content in materials. So all of that push, I think, will come through. And it is starting to become part of a conversation that's happening, but it's still early days.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The idea that batteries, I remember there was talks a few years ago that there was a battery, I think it was a Samsung Galaxy phone that was exploding and that went everywhere. And that was, again, infancy, not that long ago, but it was still happening. And there was a lot of issues about taking certain batteries on planes. And yeah, the idea of safety component is definitely something that you need to consider. And the recycling side of the industry, it's probably not as big, but you can naturally see the progression into that is evidently going to increase with all these lithium batteries that are going to be flooding the market and all the investment into the start of the life cycle to the end. But I mean, moving on to the battery side of it, which is the other component of the business. What's the objectives, or what's going on in the battery side?
Look, this is really exciting as well. Our battery powders business, we've got a pilot plant. We're making a battery chemistry today, a cathode active material today called, or CAM, which is called LFP, or lithium ferrophosphate. It's the emerging technology. It's the one that's been heavily adopted in China. Tesla is starting to pick it up. It's very different to the nickel, manganese, cobalt chemistry. It's seen as cheaper and safer. Maybe not long as lasting, or in terms of kilometres for EVs, but given a lot of EVs are in urban areas, as a charging infrastructure builds, there's going to be less of an issue. So it is the emerging chemistry. It's the one that most people are starting to move to, and we're ready and competent in making that chemistry today. Our aim is to build a demonstration plant with that facility, and when the focus for us over the next few months through the calendar year is to get to an FID around that, to build a demonstration plant, probably here in Australia, to then get further pre-qualified, because you need to scale up to be qualified by the tier 1 cell and battery makers around the world, with then a view of building commercial facilities, probably initially in the United States, just because that's where the heavy demand will be, but then through Europe and probably likely into India as well. So I can see us building certainly low digit 10s to 15 of these facilities at 10 to 12,000 tonnes around the world, and still only having low single market share numbers. So single digit market share numbers. So I think the opportunity for this business is huge. We are one of very few outside of China who have LFP and also a capability to make a LMFP, which is a lithium manganese ferrophosphate chemistry. We're one of a couple outside of China who have that capability today. So our opportunity to step away, particularly as many countries, including Australia, United States, Europe, are looking for independence of their battery critical materials away from China. That's been very much declared by President Biden in recent weeks. So everyone is scrambling to establish their own critical minerals supply chains for battery materials, and so we're right in the heart of it right now. We've got decarbonisation, supply chain shifting, very few people in that space, demand that's going exponential. We've got a great opportunity.
Yeah, it's sitting in you'd say a perfect opportunity, because naturally we've seen it, worlds or companies and even governments are shifting focus away from certain jurisdictions. I think it goes without saying that if you were reluctant to work with China, naturally there's been incentives there previously, but the world, or at least the West, has been shifting their perceptions and, how would you say, deals potentially, at least on the surface. But I think that there's clearly a direction from government, investors and society as to where we want to go, and the battery developing and processing side of it is clearly an option. So when you're looking at building this out, and you said the pilot plant, I mean, what's going to be involved in setting that up? And I mean, is that something that you've got a 5-year timeline, or what's going through the mind at your perspective?
Yeah, look, our current thinking, and we've still got some work to do, my first few months was really prioritising getting the strategy. We're now working on the execution of the strategy. But our current thinking around cathode materials opportunity is build a demonstration plant here in Australia. That we think, if we can get that through to an FID decision for the board, ideally by the end of the calendar year, but probably more likely further in FY24, in calendar year 24, early first quarter ideally. We think that we could be up and running with that demonstration plant by the end of calendar year 26, early 27. Prove up that process. We're very confident about our technology. We're very confident about our process. Without diminishing it, the equipment is pretty simple. It's off the shelf. The process itself is and getting it right. It's
bit
not
more
a know-how, but we're confident that that process itself is not overly complex to a point that is too problematic. And then once that's proven up, then we can start working straight away on building full-scale commercial facilities, because we've done some of the design work along the way. So we're paralleling this. So hopefully by the end of 27 into 28, we've actually got our first commercial facility up and running. And then off the back of that, it's really a cookie cutter. We just bang them out and
franchise model, like it's like.
Well, we could franchise it or we can build it. Depends on what our investor appetite is. But our current thinking is we'd be the owner operator of these facilities, or working with potential partners who are offtake, who, if they want, somebody wants a majority offtake off one of these units. So it's really exciting. And as I said, if we hit our 2028 timetable for a commercial facility, we'll probably be one of the first, if not the first, outside of China that's got a CAM producing facility that can sell product to cell makers and battery makers.
Okay, so naturally, as you said, you've been brought in and you're all part of the realigning the structure and the strategy. So since before we touch on the chemical side of it, what's really been involved in that part of it for yourself, in realigning the strategy for the company and figuring out what the long-term outlook is going to be? I mean, what's been involved in doing that?
Yeah, look, we knew we had some great technologies, and I guess it was, well, how do we prioritise which one comes first? We even got some more that I'm not talking about today. So we sort of said, look, let's park those, let's leave those for now, and really focus on how do we bring these various technologies to market. It would be very easy, and lots of shareholders say, well, just focus on one. But that'd be, to me, is missing an opportunity, because there's actually an interconnection between those three technologies. The recycled content can go into our battery powders business. The lithium units that come out of a lithium mine can go into our powders business. So there is some interplay between the two. Some of the technology in our chemical lithium extraction or chemicals business can also help with recovery of materials in our recycling business. So there's an interplay between them all. So to leave one behind, but we have clearly worked through in our strategy, what are we going to focus on? What comes first? What comes second? What comes third? And importantly, how we're going to commercialise those. So, if I look at our EnviroStream business, our recycling business, we will look to secure our position in Australia. We have lots of people wanting to talk to us about overseas joint ventures and opportunities. We're sort of saying, look, yeah, we'll do that, but it might be a little way off until we've really secured our Australian footprint before we start doing that next. And then that will be through licenses or JVs. So that's a commercial pathway for that. If I look at chemicals business, that lends itself, you need a lithium resource for that chemicals business to work. We don't have a lithium resource, so it lends itself to a joint development agreement with someone who does have a lithium resource. So, and then that probably lends itself to a technology, IP, JV, and some licensing model that you could take globally. So we've really sat down and really thought, not only what do we have and where's the market opportunity, but what's the commercial pathways to bring these technologies to life.
Okay, and I guess I could circle back now to the last component of the company, at least for now, but is the chemical side of it. And you mentioned before, it's a complete model, because one, they all filter into each other. It's that circular style. So can you explain a bit more about the chemical side of the company?
Yeah, look, as I said a few minutes earlier, our founder CEO was frustrated, I guess, when he was looking at lithium extraction and mines and kind of seeing how much actually went to waste versus how much went to the chemical converters. And I guess, to simplify it down for me at least, the guys made it simple. If you think about a lithium mine, a spodumene mine, about 60% of it is useful, and that's what you're getting out of lithium units, commercial grade that can go off to the chemical converters. So you've got 40% either going to waste because it doesn't make grade, or the particles are too fine for the chemical converters to actually be able to convert into the lithium hydroxide typically. So what our technology does, which we call Leaner, it's a very novel process. It's a caustic process, whereas others using other processes are quite have a pyro process and a lot of energy. Our process probably takes that 60% useful mine to being up to 90%. So if you think about that in lithium units, the price of lithium going out into chemical conversion land, that is billions of dollars for a miner. And so we think this has got huge potential for the mining community to not only make the current mining activities and future mining activities more commercially viable, but even going back to their tailings and their waste streams and getting recovery out of their waste streams. And really, that's a free kick. And when you think about that from a sustainability point of view, just the reduction of how much you've got to mine to fill all those battery and that battery demand, it's significant as well.
Well, there's a point there, the tailings side of it. I mean, can you share a bit more about what tailings are? Because it's a word thrown around and even I'm sort of a little bit unfamiliar with it, but can you break that down? Because already there it sounds like, society or a company where you want to have a lot of reusing everything, and naturally lithium, if you're only getting about 60% productivity out of your asset, you're wasting a lot. So I mean, I'm not sure how that feeds in with tailings, but can you shed a bit more light on that for me?
Yeah, so I think simply, and again, I'm not a miner, don't have a mining background, but simply put, you mine, you end up with strip that's the overburden, if you like, or the rock that's not required. You then need to place that somewhere. You need management around that. It's usually, depending on the product, you end up with water management around that as well. So it becomes a real problem. And often, when mines are end of life, you've got to deal with that. What do I do? So there's lots of reasons why miners really don't want to see that waste go. And if they can convert that not only to solve a problem around waste streams and then long-term management after mine life, if they can then not only stop that from a sustainability point of view, but actually then get dollars for it, that's a great opportunity for them.
Okay. And I mean, that's a pretty great sort of summary of everything going, but from a business point, you've got the three sections. I mean, how much of each of those components make up the entirety of Lithium Australia? Because naturally, I can't imagine it's a third. There's definitely priorities and which ones are the leaders. So how do you go about, not ranking, but saying which one's clearly more in demand at the moment, and actually that's going to shift and swing?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll answer in a couple of different angles, Ben. If I think about two of our technologies, our chemical leaner technology, our battery powders technology, they're both sort of pre-commercialisation. In the case of chemicals technology, leaner, that's in a lab. We're confident about it. We're working with ANSTO, one of the great research organisations in Australia. So we're confident about where that can go. We're going to bring that out of the lab and into a pilot plant in August, September this year. And it doesn't take much money to get that pilot plant running. But it'll be a bit of time, a couple of years to go through that piloting process before you then think about a demonstration facility. Ideally, we'll have a joint development partner take us forward because we need a resource to do that. And again, I think we're really confident that we can do that. And that'll be a focus for us in just letting that technology get underway and have its 2 years of getting a pilot plant up and running. If I then think about our BSPC or battery powders business, cathode powders business, again, we want to really get that into a FID decision. So we've got to work hard to get off-takers, people taking our product. We've got to work hard, and we're well advanced in a lot of conversations with people around that because they are excited about the product we produce and are confident about our product quality. So again, that's work that we just got to do. It's engineering studies. EnviroStream is up and running. So we really want to optimize that model right now, optimize it operationally because we've grown 30% year on year. So we've moved out of one small warehouse and facility into a much larger facility.
Yep.
And we'll probably go again in the next 3 years. So really able to get that operating model nailed down, get our commercial models nailed down. That's our focus for the next 6 months. And then really secure and anchor that, start to grow out in Australia, New South Wales, Queensland, Western Australia, is where we see our next sort of stepping stones for building facilities. So we've got clear pathways. We know how much money it will take us to deliver those. To answer your question, they've all got their own pathways. Is there a priority? Yeah, ultimately the focus for me will be to get VSPC and our battery powders, because that's the position where we can really take a first mover global advantage. Within battery recycling, our first mover is in Australia, but we can leverage that know-how of battery recycling and managing the battery value chain to take that overseas. And certainly, as I said, we've got lots of interest, particularly out of Asia, but also out of the United States, to partner with people.
But I can say, yeah, definitely Asia and the United States have been very busy with car manufacturers looking to get a toe in the stream, either in the refining or even the straight up mining side of it. There's no shortage of interest out there, clearly.
No, and as early as 5 a.m. this morning, I was on a call with a large US automotive OEM. Won't name them, and part of their interest in us was recycling. So it's really it's a fast-moving space.
Yeah, and naturally there's a fair bit to go, and it's a long plan, as we touched on earlier. But what can people expect over the next 6 to 12 months in regards to news flow, or even just objectives to tick off, and what's the objective?
I probably touched on it. We want a joint development agreement on our chemicals extraction technology. We're really focused on that, and I think very positive that we can achieve that. And regardless, we'll be taking it into a pilot plant, so watch out for that, I guess. With our battery powders business, it's really going to be about looking for where we can make announcements. Sometimes you're covered by commercial in confidence.
Yes,
with off-takers, and being able to position ourselves and looking for the progress we make on that FID decision for the board. And then with our EnviroStream, hopefully you'll see some news around securing long-term agreements with some of the EV makers, energy storage producers, so that we know that we've got the confidence that when that wave of lithium-ion batteries, large format lithium-ion batteries come, that they're coming to us.
And naturally, there's a fair bit going on, and the next question clearly is, well, where can listeners go to access this information, and where can they go to follow and keep track of the business movements and activities?
Yeah, well, obviously we've got our website. We're happy to keep talking to the market bull as well, as a clear opportunity to listen to where we're up to. But I've spent a lot of my time sort of looking at the market, looking at the customer base, where we need to go, how to get those commercialisation pathways underway. I'll certainly now be starting to turn more to talking to our investors, current and potential investors, and making sure they understand how we are progressing. So one of the things that all of us at Lithium Australia are really focused on is it's easy to say things, much harder to do, but we want to be measured about what we do, not just what we say. So we'll be explaining, and have explained already, where we're trying to go with the organisation, and people should be, we'll be making it clear how we're making progress against those milestones.
Yeah, well, I know the website, that's why I went, and it linked me to the other aspects of the company, and you've got your socials as well.
Yeah, well, great, and we know that we've got to do a better job at that. One of the things that we're thinking about right now is brand, because we have been a sort of an amalgam of different businesses. Really want to make sure that people understand the bulk of the business, and that we do have some real scale and capability across our technology platforms. And so we're really thinking about, how do we convey that in a better way than we have? I've certainly been doing some work on that. we've got some smart people outside of our organisation who are helping us with that. Watch this space. I don't know whether that means a name change, but certainly in terms of how we present the organisation and how our website works, our socials work, that's something we're very focused on improving.
Good to know. No, it's been a great insight. And yeah, as you said, you've only been there for 6 months, and I look forward to seeing what's going to happen over the next 6, 12 to a few years. And hopefully when you fly back to Perth, and should say, you're not here just to speak with me, you're here for business. But when you next come back, hopefully we can catch up again and discuss what's happening, because I think it goes without saying this industry is ever evolving. There's the demand. It's now about making sure that can be tailored for. And, Lithium Australia is in a good little position, as you highlighted, to really execute on this growing demand. So thank you for taking the time to speak with me on the show today.
Pleasure, Ben. I look forward to coming back and telling you of the further progress that we're making.
Thanks for listening to the Market Bull podcast. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow the Market Bull on our socials at Twitter and LinkedIn by searching The Market Bull. You can also subscribe to our newsletter on the website by visiting www.themarketbull.com.au.